Story 1. Tennessee Terror. I live in Tennessee, in a very haunted house. I would say the first sighting, or thing that made me believe we have a ghost living here, happened when I was 6 years old, and we had just moved in. I was wide awake, and I saw this face in my mirror. I had just woken up from a nightmare, and I screamed for my parents because they were asleep on the other side of the house. The second one was when I was 7. I was sitting up, and I felt something crawl up my leg. I flipped the bed sheets over, and there were bugs all over my bed. I screamed for my parents, and my dad came running in, and I said, "Bugs, lots of them." When we flipped on the lights, they all disappeared. That did it for me. I was a believer after that. The haunting quickly progressed to shadowy people in the hallway, voices and giggles, quick footsteps when no one was there. Eventually, even my parents experienced the ghostly beings that inhabited our house. Story 2. The Monster. This happened in my hometown in Illinois, which used to be inhabited by Native Americans. Well, the official story is they just used to pass through our area. But many, like myself, believe there's more to it. We believe it actually settled here, even if only for brief periods of time. There's always talk about bones being found when pools are dug up or gardens put in. But most say that's just it, talk. But not me. I believe. I also believe that the ground this town lives on is soured, cursed, beyond anyone's wildest dreams. I have many stories to support this belief. But for now, I'll start with my first story. It was a cold, but normally cold, night. It was autumn. Cold enough to keep you inside and snuggled under a blanket. And I was doing exactly that. I was only 8, and you can only do so much during those times. I chose to do my homework so I could read later. I was playing a Rick Springfield album on the 8-track. Well, actually it was a robot toy that you could play 8-track cartridges on. It was made by some company to be a trivia game. You'd play a cartridge, and it would ask you questions and tell you jokes. It had these big red robot eyes that flashed when you were correct. It had 3 buttons that you could push to answer your question. But since it could play normal 8 tracks, that's what I was doing, and the robot's eyes was flashing in time with the music. I was quite content. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor of my house, and it faced north along with my bed. I had a window north of me and to the east of me. Of course, it was dark outside, but it was also warm inside and very comforting. Every now and then, I would just look out the window, look out into the darkness for my homework. For no reason, it was just something I did. Now, this is the last time I ever did that in this house. I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, I felt instantly cold, like cold to the bone. Every single hair on my body was raised. My blood felt like it was running with ice. My heart was racing. I was perfectly terrified. And I didn't know why. Yet. My robot was suddenly stuck and kept playing the same verse over and over. Hole in my heart, hole in my heart, hole in my heart. Its eyes wasn't flashing anymore. They were just burning bright red. I felt this magnetic pull, like something was pulling me to my right. I turned my head and looked out the east window, and I saw something that has haunted me every day since. Just barely outside my window, levitating, was the most horrifying image I have ever seen in my life. A creature, about 2 feet tall, sitting cross-legged. Its skin was snowy white. You could see the outline of its bones. It was that skinny. He had white cloth draped around his body. The creature's head was too big for its body. He was completely bald. Two big, horrible, dark eyes were piercing my soul as he stared at me. He opened his mouth and grinned a grin that has haunted my dreams for years. His mouth was full of long, razor-sharp looking teeth, dripping with blood. And then he raised his hands and reached. The fingernails were at least 4 inches long, sharpened to points. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I was locked into place by his piercing eyes. I couldn't breathe. I felt like my brain was being scrambled. Like my soul was being ripped from my body. His grin somehow became larger. He opened his mouth wider, and he kept looking at me, as if he knew. As if he'd been waiting for me. He looked as if any second he could be inside my room. All traces of reason disappeared, and my mind snapped. I still don't know how, but I did manage to tear my gaze away, leap off my bed, and out of my bedroom door, screaming with everything I had. I screamed down the hallway to my mother. Of course, her and my father and my younger brother came back to my room, and it was gone. But they knew I had to have seen something. They did not try to tell me it was my imagination. They comforted me, and they taped all of the windows in my room shut. All the windows had pulled down shades, so they pulled them all down and sealed all the sides with duct tape. I couldn't sleep in that room for almost a year. The whole family, Mom, Dad, my brother, and my sister, know about this experience. My brother even remembers coming into my room with my parents afterwards. This isn't a story that we tell often. It's always brought fear to speak of it, to us and to others. I'm an adult now, with a small family of my own, and I live several states away. But I will never forget this creature. I will never sleep or sit with my back to a window, because I swear that I heard it say, "Someday I'm coming back," as I was fleeing. Story 3. Footsteps. This is my mother's story, and she was 22 at the time of this experience. She lived with my dad, my aunt, my grandmother, and some uncles. While living there, she and my father lived in the basement. My sisters were just babies. I hadn't even been thought of yet. It all started one day when everyone had left for work. My mom was going about her daily chores when, out of nowhere, she heard a knock on the upstairs front door. She ran up the stairs to see who it was, but there was no one there. It happened 3 more times that day. When my grandmother came home, my mom asked her if she'd been expecting anyone, that she'd heard knocks on the door. My grandmother told her that she hadn't been expecting anyone over. The next day, when everyone left again, my mom was again doing her chores. This time, she heard a knock and someone step inside the foyer. This kept on happening, but the steps went, each day, from the foyer through the living room, then into the kitchen, to the door that leads to the basement apartment. During these events, my mom would be scared to death, because she was all alone with my twin sisters. Finally, she told a friend what was happening. Her friend agreed to go in the house with her and have dinner. During dinner, nothing happened. But while they were doing the dishes, my mom heard the footsteps coming down the stairs that led from the upstairs bedrooms. She turned to her friend and said, "Gloria, do you?" And her friend said, Yeah, I hear that." My mom called out to my dad and said, "Is someone walking down the stairs?" He replied, "No." and the steps minimized until they finally disappeared altogether. She still wonders what was going on in that house. Story 4. Strange and Unusual. A friend of mine told me about this place several months back. I was so amazed at this story that I asked if he would take me there. No one ever really goes there, I guess because it's so dark and creepy. At least at night it is. During the day, it's not really all that strange. First, let me tell you a little bit more about why the place is called what it is. The city is called Lake Forest, but they call it Canyon Creek. I guess because it's nothing but a canyon. Wide open space with nothing but rocks and wildlife. The story goes back at least 30 years. The lady was in her 40s, but no one knew what her name was. She lived alone with her 2 big dogs. She was very rich, and she owned almost all of the canyon, which is like miles and miles of land. She never married. She had no children. One night, law enforcement got a call about the old lady and her dog. So a police officer went out to do a welfare check. When he knocked at the door, he got no answer. Eventually, he broke down the door. He found the lady, dead. There was nothing left but bones. Beside her was her 2 dogs, also dead. And that's when the unusual and strange things started to happen. People who have never been to this place and don't know what to expect will be wary of this place. Sometimes nothing happens. Other times strange things happen. Like sometimes you'll be driving down the canyon and you'll see a lady standing on the side of the road with 2 dogs, her thumb sticking out like she's trying to get a ride home. It's always best not to stop, not to offer a ride. My friend told me that his ex-girlfriend and her boyfriend went up there one night to check it out. They stopped where the old lady's house had been. They were only there for about 15 minutes, talking, listening to music, when all of a sudden they heard a knock on the side of their car, the driver's side door. They both turned to look, and they saw an old lady standing there, knocking at the window. She was dressed all in white and covered in blood. Nearby stood 2 big dogs. They sat there in shock, and she banged on the window for 4 or 5 minutes. For some reason, she just wouldn't stop. They put the car in gear and drove off. They never returned there, and they never looked back. I'd love to know if there's something more to why she haunts people. Why she haunts this area. Maybe she just doesn't want anyone on her land that she loves so much. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. Bye.